Hey everyone, I hope you guys are having a great day. We've been looking around and trying to figure out what to do with this space for a little while. It just started out as trying to get the word out about what I was thinking with regard to Ukraine and the situation there, just because some people have been asking about it. And obviously, it wasn't something that we had written about so directly. Although I will say that James did he hit the nail pretty on the head with Battlefield Ukraine so many years ago, and obviously the outcomes in that book are a little bit different than what we're seeing today. But that was also before we had seen what the Ukrainians would be able to mobilize. We were, I think, and I don't want to speak for him, but James was really thinking more about the 2014 invasion of Crimea and how that turned out, I think. So that makes sense. Well, so after a while, I thought, I've gone through the process of trying to figure out how this stuff works, and I'm kind of enjoying it. So why not keep it going? And but to do that, really kind of have to figure out something else to do. And so we did last week. We did a kind of a movie review of The Day After, and I said that I'd tweak that format and maybe keep doing some of those now and again. But another idea came to me, which was we could use this time to kind of get into some of the details of the battles that we've seen in the books that James and I are writing. Specifically, in Monroe Doctrine 4 and 5 on the Russian side, I wrote most of those battles between the Chinese and the Russians, and then of course fighting with the Russians in those books, as strange as it sounds to say it today, are NATO units. So we had the Polish airborne unit, the 25th Airborne Brigade, fighting alongside the Schnellkräfte of Germany, as well as a Russian VDV unit. So that was a lot of fun writing those, but the geography is pretty unknown to a lot of people, and so we got a lot of requests for maps, and maybe I'll show you a map. I'll put a map up right here. The maps that were coming out, I didn't like them, and they really didn't stand up to a lot of scrutiny. So what I thought I would do tonight is to sit down and walk you through one of the theaters in Monroe Doctrine 4 and show you the battlefield on Google Maps and kind of walk you through some of the decisions that were made, where some of the locations are, to give you kind of a frame, so that if you did reread that, then you would have a much better grounding in what was going on. But at the same time, if you're just a writer coming in over from the writing community on Twitter, if you're a writer, you might get something out of seeing how I approach writing these battles. And so I'll give a little bit of background on that as well. It shouldn't be a long video, but I'm still new at this stuff, so I sometimes don't know when I'm going on too long. So with all of that said, let's go ahead and go to the map. Okay, well, let's go ahead and start in my neck of the woods out here in Dallas, Texas. That'll just give you kind of a frame of where we're starting from, so you can let you know where we're going to. And in this case, we're going to pretty much the other side of the world. So I'm going to zoom out from Dallas. We're going to cross the Pacific. I could have crossed over Europe too, to be honest. It's almost equidistant. But what we're looking for is not actually the border of China and Russia, but in fact, it's Mongolia and Russia. So before the Chinese could make this attack, they first had to sweep into Mongolia, which didn't take them very long at all. It was hardly even mentioned in the book, just because there was no real resistance. Now, this area is called Transbaikal because right here we have Lake Baikal in Russia. And so that's where we're going to start our story, and that is here in the town of Ulan-Ude. This is where Pasha, the Russian paratrooper, is stationed. In fact, when we first meet Pasha, he's trying to figure out how he's going to discipline one of his soldiers for getting into a fight the night before. But before he's able to come to a conclusion on that, he actually gets a special assignment because of his background in NATO languages. And so they send him down to, let's see, it was, where are we? There we go. Tarbagatai. So Tarbagatai here is where NATO is essentially putting all of the rapid response forces as they get in theater. And so they start to sort them out there. And so this is where Pasha meets Nicholas from the German Schnellkrafte. And the two of them are then taken to an abandoned old Soviet airfield. And the remnants of it can be seen right over here, that they're laying down steel decking and they're turning it into a helicopter base. And the first unit to occupy that base is the 25th Polish Airborne, the famous Uhlans. And so they actually meet the third of their party, which is Miroslav, and he's a Polish paratrooper. I'm sorry, a Polish helicopter soldier attached to the headquarters unit of that 25th. So the three of them, I'm just giving a little bit of a narrative to set up how the battle starts from the perspective of the book, are sent down to visit with a NATO, in this case an Italian Alpini unit. It's the one of their artillery units that's set up in defense of Russia down along the border with Mongolia. And specifically, they're sent to the town of Kyacht. And from there, and if you look in the books, you can they pick up a car and the three paratroopers drive through the mountain roads looking for a hill. Now, what I want to do is I want to bring up the terrain layer so you can actually see these hills a little better. So there, the NATO unit is actually sitting on these hills over here. And if you actually look at the hill numbers, they correspond to sections of this outcrop over here. And I should have gone in and taken another look. I'm pretty sure it's this 1,000-meter hill over here, and then one of these over here is where I wrote them in. But there's a NATO spotter unit on these hills over here, and then across a valley in these hills on the far side. And the idea is that if you're going to attack into Transbaikal from Mongolia, you're not going to want to do it through this wet and mountainous terrain, or you got this river over here, more mountains. Basically, the highway into Russia is the Kirin Plain. And so this was actually funny because this was one that got caught in editing. Sometimes I would refer to it as Kirin because it is on the Chinese side, and sometimes as Kirin on the Russian side. But just for simplicity's sake, we'll just keep it Kirin with a hard K on the front. So it's kind of like the folded gap that the Cold War kids like me got so familiar with. It's one of those things where if there was going to be an attack, you knew that this was precisely where that attack was going to come, so you would want to defend it. The difference between the Fulda Gap and the Kirin Plain is that Russia didn't have enough time or forces to sufficiently stop a Chinese invasion. So the Russians are trying to stop the invasion with essentially one motor rifle brigade, and that's the 36th Motor Rifle Brigade. And they were stationed in Kyacht and ended up having to deploy into the nooks and crannies of the Kirin Valley. So wherever you would have some cover or some terrain on your side, they were trying to put units in there to help slow down the Chinese attack. Now, the Chinese, on the other hand, they definitely got there first with the most. They brought in two entire group armies. And the group armies are interesting. They're completely combined arms. They're made up of combined arms battalions. And every one of them has every of the battalions has the armor, has infantry, has artillery. And the first of the group armies sent a battalion, one of the combined arms battalions, into Kyakt, and that was the smallest of the attacking forces. And they came in and really did get punched in the nose by the Russians, but there just weren't enough troops. What the Russians basically did was set up anti-tank traps using their anti-tank guided missiles so that the Chinese would essentially, bleed out as they came in, but there was just not enough time. There was not enough ammunition. There just wasn't enough of anything. There weren't enough men for the Russians to really seriously stop them. So they essentially abandoned their, once they fired their weapons, once they fired the missiles, they left the launchers in place and fled into the hills, basically to try to regroup further behind the line. And so that was how Kyakt got taken. And the rest of the armies, though, rolled right into the Kirin Plain. There was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun writing the scenes with the drones, and so the Chinese had essentially hacked the Italian drones so that when the invasion started, the Chinese drones lost power or lost signal and were programmed to return to their point of origin. Well, since the Chinese were tracking the drones, they immediately found out where the spotters were all located, so they were able to wipe out the Italian spotting units. So that really drastically reduced the effectiveness of their artillery. And from that point, they really just occupied the Kirin Valley, and the Italian Alpinis, the guns were located up in the hills, and they were withdrawn, and the infantry assigned to that Alpini unit were, fought, almost to the last man in the hills, trying to protect the withdrawal of the big guns. And basically it was just a bad opening battle for the NATO forces and for Russia. And we leave that theater and we move on and talk about some other places, and we'll definitely talk through some of these other battles if you guys are interested. But where we pick it up again, the Chinese have occupied the plain, they've re-solidified their lines, and now they have a choice to make. I'm going to scroll out a little bit. And if you're looking, the main goal here is to get in, break through transportation lines that are reinforcing or getting supplies to Siberia or to the Far East, the Russian Far East. So in order to do that, they really have a few choices. They could come through the first valley here at Bichura and attack in to try to get into Balyaga. And you know what? It kills me because yes, I was trained as a Russian linguist, but it's been a few years, and reading these things on the fly is not doing me any favors. If I were a professional, I would definitely be practicing this a little more. So I do apologize if I'm mangling some of these place names that I really should get better. So you've got first in through the Bichura Valley and try to get over to Balyaga. And then the next one is to come up through this second valley, which goes through Mukhashibir, and that would get you into the supply lines over here. And then of course the last one, which seems the most direct but also the most difficult, would be to just continue up the Silenge Valley all the way into Ulan-Ude. And the Silenge is this river that's running down through here. In fact, in the book, the troops started referring to Tarbagatai as Fortress Silenge. That's where that name comes from. So the Russians decide first to probe the Bichura Valley. Now, they don't know it, but what NATO did was they concentrated their artillery here in Bialiute. This gave them a good area of coverage to defend both the Bichura Valley and any attempt to move north and get into the Mukhashibir Valley. So the artillery is located here, and then our fearless heroes, Pasha and Miro and Nicholas, are set up with Spike ER missiles in the hills on the south side of the valley protecting Biliute. So the first signal that the Russians are coming, I'm sorry, the Chinese are coming, is a recon element that comes in through Okino-Kluchi. And so they call that in, and that gets drilled by some artillery, but they've decided they've got enough, they're close enough, the main thrust does come in. So we end up with a major battle where, just like in Kyakt, there's just not enough ammunition to stop every Chinese person or every Chinese vehicle. So instead, they fire off their missiles just like so we see it now in the first battle at Kyakt. We just saw that, or we read the narrative. Okay, this is what they did. They fired their missiles and then they ran. Well, this time we actually see it in action. So the German unit, they fire off their Spike ER missiles, they spike the launchers with grenades, and then they flee into the mountains. And so they then are away from the battle. And they're hoping, again, to regroup, in this case, back further in the mountains, further in the lines, so that they can get ready for the next effort to defend. While this is happening, our friends with the Italian Alpini get wiped out as a massed helicopter attack takes out the artillery. The mobile artillery was able to get out, but the static guns, the stationary guns, they didn't have time to get them out before the attack took them out. The Russians, or I'm sorry, I've just got Russian invasion on my mind. I can't help it. But the Chinese, they do fight in. They fight all the way over to Bichura, but ultimately it's kind of a Pyrrhic victory. They really are not. They've taken too many losses, and they're not establishing sufficient goals to justify those attacks. And that's really where the battle for Transbaikal ends in Monroe Doctrine 4 is with the I don't know if you call it a success or a failure. Tactically a failure, but maybe tactically a failure for the NATO forces, but strategically and overall, it definitely slowed them down. And so there's at least something. It went way better for them than the initial Battle of the Kirin Plain. Okay. So just really quick before we go, I want to point out that this city right here is Cheetah. It like the animal, or like the Patriots, Cheetah. And so there's going to be we're going to talk about the Battle of Cheetah in a future video. Additionally, some places that we're going to look at. This is, of course, Vladivostok. And the early battles here take place in this area called Spassk Dolny, and we might talk a little bit about Ussurisk, which was another major battle, but that one really took place off page. Our point of view characters were over here in Spassk Dolny. I actually, I'll link to it in the description below, but there's actually a vlog that I watched so that I could get a feel for the town of Spassk Dolny. And it's this Russian girl who she's a college kid, does videos about her town. It was pretty random, but I thought it was really interesting. And, since the Ukrainian invasion, she's actually had a lot of interesting things, or at least I think they're interesting, to say kind of about what it's like being a All right, well, that's the Transbaikal Theater, featuring the Battle of the Kirin Plain first, and then the Battle of Bichura Valley. And, I know I just said it, but I really hope you guys are getting something out of this. I hope you really enjoy it. And let me know, what else can we do with this video space? We've got the internet, we've got the camera. We might as well do something. I figure I'll probably do another movie review. I mentioned that at the top. But you know, with all that, I think that's the video, and I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, I'll leave a link for that vlog from Spostadalny, and I'll leave a link for Monroe Doctrine Volume 4 and Volume 5 in stores. Buy them, read them, they're great. If anybody has any questions, just leave them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them. I mean, you'll notice that there's not a lot of comments, so I think I can probably find the time. And if you're really into this, then go ahead and subscribe. Why not? You know, nobody else has. So anyway, I'm looking forward to talking to you guys next Tuesday, and I'll see you then.